This one is an ode to the micromanager. So if you know that you have a habit of micromanaging and have somehow become aware enough to actually stop and listen to this, first of all, well done. That can be really challenging to actually notice that kind of behavior. Or if you are trying to manage a micromanager, or if you work for a micromanager and are trying to find a solution or a way forward or suggestions and being proactive, this is for you too. Micromanagement is really challenging. It's challenging to work with as an employee or someone who is being managed by that person. And I imagine it would also be really challenging for the manager who is displaying that behavior as well, because it just means that their head is just running a million miles an hour trying to control everything. And I can't imagine, I can a little bit, but in different ways, but I can't really imagine what kind of stress that has on like mental stress and physical stress and even emotional stress to care so much that that you feel like you have to have oversight and small incremental oversight over every little thing, especially when you've hired people to do those jobs for you. So if you are unfamiliar with micromanagement, basically, I didn't look up an explicit definition of it, but basically micromanagement is when someone in a managerial position hires people to do these jobs that they've hired them for, but kind of lords over them in the way that they check on every little detail of them doing the work. They try to tell them how to do the work, even though their staff might have been doing it for long enough that they know what to doing. So it goes beyond just training, and it can create a really toxic environment, even if you really get along with the person, the manager in general. Otherwise, micromanagement can really bring the vibe down, if you will, and create toxicity in the sense of resentment. And people are hired, they just want to be able to do their jobs, and when they feel like they can't, or where they feel like they can't take accountability or responsibility for what they're doing, that's usually when they just stop trying to, and that's where you reach issues. So micromanagement can actually be the prelude to the issues that they may use as the reason to why they micromanage, of that person's not doing their job well enough, so I have to. It's like, well, usually it's because mentally they've switched off, because they're like, well, I don't even have responsibility over this because they're going to check it anyway, and they actually stop trying. So it creates its own negative effect. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way. So for the micromanager, I have 5 tips or thought points to put forward. Again, whether you are the micromanager or whether you recognize a micromanager within your business and are looking at ways of how to deal with that and manage that yourself. So tip number 1 is asking yourself, are you communicating your expectations clearly, and asking for the person that say your staff member, to feed them back to you for clarity. So it's one thing to sort of say, well, I told them I wanted them to do this, or I expected them to do this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the person actually understood. They may have thought they understood. This is all about communication and feedback and making sure that we're on the same page, right? So they may have thought they understood, but maybe there was just a little misunderstanding in there that got missed along the way. So communicating expectations clearly means communicating the job. So beyond the position description that you hired them under, it's communicating like, okay, this is sort of what I need from you each week, and each day I need you to do this. If you happen to run out of work, this is like, this is how you can manage it. You can come to me, that kind of thing. So looking at all the scenarios and going, okay, this is my expectations, but then asking them to feed it back to you. So go like, okay, so what's your understanding of your expectations, of the expectations I have? Can you just feed that back to me? And then when they feed it back to you in their own words, they may use similar words that you've used or the same, but then you'll also notice different words. And then you can have an idea of, first, where the gaps are in understanding, and also second, of different words that you can use next time you communicate something similar and go, oh, they understood it as that, so yeah, that's a better word to use. So that's a really helpful thing in general in communication, but particularly in this environment and this scenario, definitely recommend. Number 2 is then checking in, are your actions, this is a big one, are your actions aligned with the expectations you've stated? So it's great if you've gotten to the point where you've communicated those expectations, you've got the feedback, and you've gone, okay, cool, we're clear. But then as the way you act, is that aligned with the expectations? So are you still hovering over them, or somehow in some maybe unconscious or conscious way still expecting them to be different to what you've just clearly stated? So to me, it's not really good enough to expect the employee to like have the feeling of, well, they should just step up. I expect them to step up and over deliver, right? When you've clearly stated expectations, anything additional to that is a bonus, right? So when you state your expectations, you really need to state exactly what you want, and exactly what you expect in a fair way. It's a whole other video, but exactly what you want and exactly what you expect. And then measure that employee based on them meeting it, rather than judging them or trying to then micromanage them based on the fact that they may not be over delivering. But if that wasn't an expectation that you've set, if you hadn't stated, and I want you to look for ways to add more value, maybe as explicitly, then your actions aren't aligned with the expectations you've stated. And it's also your actions. So if you work in an office together, your actions of how you hover around, and I'm going to use that word hover a lot because that's kind of the feeling of the micromanager. They're looking over your shoulder, they're hovering a lot. So how you hover around, how you allow them to get their work done, or try to control how they do that. So check that your actions are in line with your expectations that you've stated. Number 3 is checking in and ensuring that adequate training has been provided for the employee. So it's not enough to be like, I expect you to do this. Even when people step up into managerial roles, even if they're qualified in every other way, they have experience, it is really important to give people managerial training. If they haven't had it before, if it's a newer position, that's great, but give them an opportunity to receive training to help them fulfill their role and be in that position and thrive, which then helps you thrive. But also, even if they're a seasoned manager and they're a new person into your company, it's really important to give them a sense of, maybe it's not brand new management training, but give them a sense of training in a way that you expect management to be, or how the culture is. So make sure that adequate training is provided for the employee. And as a manager, that is your job to do, to help them steer that way. Even if you're not directly providing the training, outsource somehow. Number 4, once you've done all that, check in. Are you focusing on your own stuff, your own job? So your job is not to hover over the jobs of those that you employ or those that you manage. Your job is to do your job. So your job isn't to help them do theirs or control them doing theirs. Your job as a manager is to kind of have the oversight and see without lording over, and then take it up a notch. So are you doing your job, basically? And if you think that your job is to just manage them doing their jobs on the everyday, not in the performance managing and the checking in and the guiding, but actually just kind of telling them all the little ways that they have to do their job, then you might want to reconsider what you believe your actual position to be. So the other part of that is I would check in with, if you're not doing that, if you're not looking at your own stuff and your own job to do, what is it that you are avoiding? So this goes a little deeper, and it may be a little confronting to look at, but is there a sense of feeling inadequate in your own position as management? Sometimes that's what it comes down to, is feelings of inadequacy of, oh, I don't know if I can actually do my job in this management position, because maybe you haven't been provided adequate training either, or maybe you have a micromanager as well, right? But when we feel inadequate, as the example, when we feel inadequate, we avoid looking at our own stuff and try to help control other people, because then we feel productive at least. We're like, well, I'm managing, look at me, managing over here. So look at whether you're actually doing your job, or if you're just trying to do their jobs for them and tell them how wrong they are. And number 5 is really, really simple. Are you breathing? Often micromanagers, or those who display tendencies of micromanagement, will be the really highly strung and stressed ones. So you can be highly strung and stressed without wavering into micromanagement, absolutely. It's not to say that they're both one and the same, but micromanagers tend to also be really highly strung and super stressed and just really tightly wound and trying to control everything. And it's very typical of when you do try to control everything that you hold your breath because you just want to make it right, and you have this tight grip, or try to have this tight grip over everything because it has to be just right, exactly how you feel it, instead of just trusting the people that you hire to bring their own magic, because we can't be great at everything and we can't do everything, which is why we then delegate and hire other people to bring their own magic, which may actually help even more. Sometimes micromanagers will tend to just stop breathing. I mean, they're breathing, but are they slowing down enough? There can be a fast pace to it, instead of just slowing down and pausing, taking the time to pause and consider and respond to things rather than reacting as well. So in micromanagement, it can be a lot of reaction based rather than the pausing and responding based. So those 5 things: so communicate expectations, check that your actions are aligned with those expectations, ensure adequate training is provided, focus on your own job as well, and your job is not to help, to manage, is not to micromanage and tell people the minute details of how to do their job that they've already been doing beyond training, and making sure you're breathing. Those things are really, really important. So check in if you are trying to manage a micromanager or deal with a micromanager and are looking for ways to approach it. They can be a good starting point. How you have that conversation, especially if you are being managed by a micromanager, would be different for each case, but they are really great action points to kind of check in with and go, okay, well, this is a potential solution of a way forward as well. So good luck. It's no fun, and micromanagement really doesn't help. It really can stifle the environment, which can then stifle how the company thrives or the organization thrives. So good luck with it, and see how you go.